Hey guys, tonight we drift back into a world that feels familiar only in the way an old dream sometimes does. Foggy around the edges, a little too quiet, and strangely heavy with unspoken rules you don't remember learning. You step into it the way you'd step into a cool room after a long day, letting the air settle around your shoulders. Here, a woman who lives alone without a man is not just unusual, she's practically a headline waiting to happen. You can almost hear the neighbors whispering before you've even taken off your shoes. And honestly, based on how quickly people in the past jump to conclusions, you probably wouldn't survive this without at least 3 backup plans and a fake husband made of laundry sacks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me your location and your local time in the comments. It's always strangely soothing to see night owls from all over the world drifting in together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the edge of a narrow medieval street, the kind that seems to curl in on itself like a secret. Candlelight spills through shutters that don't quite close. Someone coughs behind a wall, a stray cat brushes your ankle. Surprised that you're upright and not carrying a loaf of stale bread, you move slowly, because in this world, speed equals guilt, and guilt equals someone dropping the word witch before dessert. The woman whose life you're stepping into tonight doesn't have a husband, brother, father, cousin, or suspiciously muscular neighbor living with her. She has no built-in shield against the noise of society. That already makes her an outlier. People in this time genuinely believed that a woman alone must be either incredibly strong or catastrophically doomed, and sometimes both at the same time. A mainstream historical fact tucked right into this dimly lit street. In many medieval towns, unmarried or unguarded women paid extra taxes simply because authorities assumed they needed closer supervision. Historians still argue whether this was about safety or just a creative way to get more money from people who couldn't easily fight back. But this lonely street also carries a fringe tidbit. Some regions insisted that women living alone could only extinguish their hearth fire at certain hours, as if fire itself behaved better when a man was around. It's the kind of rule that sounds made up, until you realize humans have always been great at inventing nonsense when bored. You keep walking, letting the world thicken around you. Laundry flaps above like tiny judgmental flags. A wooden sign creaks overhead. You smell bread, smoke, and the faint panic of somebody realizing they forgot to lock the chicken coop again. You step over a puddle that looks suspiciously warm. Best not to think too hard about that, and keep moving toward the small house tucked away at the end of this crooked line of homes. She lives here, a woman alone. No husband to send out warnings, no man to stand in doorways looking stern, no deep-voiced presence to confirm that she's respectable. She has built a life out of quiet routines and careful appearances, but tonight you're seeing her world before any of that structure becomes clear. Right now, you're simply feeling the weight of her solitude pressing softly on the windows. Her home is small, as most homes were rooms barely wider than your outstretched arms. A single table, a single bed, a single chair that lets her back crack in exactly the same place every morning. You sense the vulnerability instantly. Doors here don't click shut so much as they lean into their frames like tired elders. Locks are more symbolic than sturdy. To live alone means calculating every noise at night, memorizing which steps creak and which don't, and deciding which lie you'll tell the next time someone asks where your man of the house is. But solitude also brings a strange kind of power. You feel it in the stillness. She controls her own hours, her chores, her food, her silence. She doesn't answer to anyone when she decides to sleep in or eat the last piece of cheese at midnight like a rebellious raccoon. Sure, society frowns at her, but society also frowns at everything. If frowning burned calories, this village would be shredded. You sit at her table, listening to the tick of a cooling pot. The night settles comfortably around you, like a wool blanket that smells faintly of smoke. Outside, the world continues its little dance of rumors and early bedtimes. Inside, you feel her determination quietly holding the place together. She isn't heroic by choice, just by necessity. A woman living alone in this era doesn't get the luxury of mediocre days. Every small act, buying flour, fixing a hinge, picking herbs, becomes a performance threaded with risk and resilience. You breathe slowly. The house breathes with you. And as you sit there in her tiny, flickering world, You realize this is only the beginning. Everything she does tomorrow will be shaped by the fact that she walks this path alone, with a backbone forged from whispers, chores, and sheer endurance. You wake before dawn the way she does because in this world, sleeping late is a luxury reserved for people whose reputation isn't held together with twine and wishful thinking. The air is cool, damp, and almost metallic, like the room itself is exhaling before the village starts judging anyone. You shift under a coarse blanket that feels halfway between a comforter and a mild exfoliation tool. Outside, a rooster decides it's time to scream into the void. You can relate. As you sit up, you feel that familiar pressure around the ribs, the knowledge that simply being a woman who lives alone paints a target on your back. Not a dramatic, flaming arrow kind of target, but the subtle, people are absolutely watching kind. You open the shutters anyway, letting a pale wash of morning light spill across the cramped room. The dust drifts lazily, like it has nothing better to do. A mainstream historical fact floats quietly into your mind. In many medieval communities, a woman who lived without a male guardian had to register with local authorities just to prove she wasn't hiding anything improper. Historians still argue whether these rules were meant to protect women or to keep them obedient. Honestly, based on how quickly officials find people for blinking too loud, the answer is probably both, and also neither. You wrap your shawl around your shoulders and step outside. The ground is muddy, and your shoes make a sound like someone trying to quietly sneak away from responsibilities. You aren't the only person awake. Bakers are already firing. Ovens. Mothers are already shouting at their kids. And someone's goat is already halfway through breaking the latch on a storage shed. The world never waits for you here, especially not if you're on your own. And because you live alone, danger doesn't come in the dramatic forms people imagine: wolves, bandits, mythical beasts that definitely appeared in Uncle Gerard's very sober story. No, the real dangers are quieter, more human. A neighbor who notices you bringing home food too often. A merchant who refuses to sell you something because you aren't accompanied. A tax collector who insists you owe more because it looks like you can afford it. This place was the original subscription service. You get charged extra for everything. You walk toward the communal well, bucket in hand. You keep your posture steady upright, calm, slightly bored. That's a survival tactic, by the way. If you look too confident, you're hiding something. If you look too weak, you're prey. If you look too cheerful, you're either insane or possessed. So, you aim for that perfect balance. Neutral face, light eye contact, nothing that gives anyone an excuse to label you. The women at the well glance your way, and the gossip shifts. It always does. Their whispers weave through the morning air. One of them smiles politely, the kind of polite that could snap in half if you touched it. You fill your bucket, careful not to splash. A single drop on your skirt might become the day's hot theory. She was in a hurry. Why? The medieval world loved overthinking long before the internet perfected it. But even now, you feel a spark of stubbornness under your ribs. Living alone isn't just danger, it's independence. Quiet, thrilling, terrifying independence. You make your own money. You set your own schedule. You choose your own meals, even if choice tonight is just stale bread or slightly older stale bread. You walk home with your bucket, trying not to. Think about how heavy it is. Gravity feels personal today. Halfway back, you pass a slanted wooden notice board. It's covered in scribbles, tax reminders, festival announcements, and a quirky little tidbit. A rule stating that unaccompanied women walking after sundown must carry a lantern visible from 20 paces. Apparently the lantern doesn't protect you, it just tells everyone where you are, which is somehow worse. Historians still debate whether rules like this genuinely reduce danger or simply helped busybodies judge more efficiently. By the time you reach your door, the village has fully woken. Men argue about grain weights. Children sprint in chaotic zigzags, proving once again that human beings under age 10 contain infinite energy and zero coordination. A dog trots past carrying a shoe that definitely does not belong to its owner. Life hums, and you slip back inside your little house. You set the bucket down and rest your hands against the table. This is the moment she feels every morning, the tension of being watched, paired with the freedom of answering to no one inside these walls. It's a strange balance, a tightrope. One misstep, and you're a rumor. But if you walk it well enough, you carve out a life that's yours alone. You breathe slowly. Remember, in this era, Danger hides in human assumptions more often than in dark forests. And today, like every day, you will navigate those assumptions with quiet precision. Because living alone without a man isn't just unusual here. It's practically a defiant act. You ease into the softer light of mid-morning, when the world finally stops yelling long enough for you to hear your own thoughts. The village isn't peaceful, nothing in this era is peaceful, but it's predictable, which is almost the same thing. A cart rattles over stones. Someone drops a pot and swears in a whisper because their grandmother is within scolding distance. The air smells like rye bread, smoke, and the faint panic of someone realizing they've been boiling the same cabbage since yesterday. Today, your thoughts settle on a truth that shapes your entire place in this world. If a woman lives alone, people automatically assume she must be a widow. It's the most socially acceptable explanation. Widowhood, ironically, is one of the few statuses that grants a woman more freedom than marriage ever did. You don't cheer for her husband's death, this isn't that kind of story, but you do notice how the world softens slightly when it thinks you've already paid your dues in grief. A mainstream historical fact slips into the room like a draft. In much of medieval and early modern Europe, widows could own property, run businesses, and appear in court without a male representative. That was enormous, nearly revolutionary. Historians still argue whether this expanded authority was meant to empower them or simply to keep economic wheels turning when men conveniently kept dying. But here's a quirky detail most people never hear. In some regions, widows were expected to wear specific colors for years, sometimes black, sometimes dull brown because brighter clothing was considered inappropriate cheer. Imagine mourning your spouse and getting scolded for wearing a good shade of blue. Society has always found new ways to micromanage women. You step outside again, shawl tucked around your neck. A few villagers nod respectfully now, assuming you fit into the tidy widow category. It's strange how a single presumed tragedy grants you more mobility than simply existing alone by choice. No one asks too many questions. They assume your husband died of illness, or war, or maybe even that mysterious, he traveled and never returned, situation that sounds dramatic, but probably just involved questionable decision-making and bad directions. Widowhood gives you a kind of protective cloak. It's thin, yes, closer to cheesecloth than armor, but it keeps the worst, suspicions from sticking. People see you as a woman who has known loss, and loss commands a certain kind of silence. Even gossipers tread lightly around it, like it might be contagious. You walk toward the small garden patch behind your home. The soil is stubborn this year, and the cabbages seem to be playing a slow game of, will we survive? With you. You kneel down, feeling the earth crumble under your fingers. Gardening is one of the few tasks that doesn't come with commentary from the neighbors, mostly because they're too busy failing at their own gardens. As you work, you think about how your role in this community is shaped by the absence of a man you never actually had. That's the irony. The imaginary husband grants you more legitimacy than an actual husband might have. If he were alive, he might micromanage your chores, your meals, your sleep schedule, your existence. But a dead husband? He's perfect. Silent, respectably tragic, zero maintenance, never interrupts. You to explain how firewood should be stacked at a better angle. You carry your basket toward the market square, moving at a steady pace. A couple of merchants nod. One even smiles, which in this age is basically a hug. You select onions, apples, and dried fish that smells exactly like you expect dried fish to smell. Persistent. Strong enough to remind you it once had opinions. While you shop, you hear two older women debating near a fruit stand. One insists widows make the best bread because sorrow deepens flavor. The other swears that widows attract ghosts more easily because their homes hold too much quiet. Historians still argue whether medieval Europeans genuinely believed widows invited spirits, or if that was just an imaginative way to explain why their curtains fluttered at night. You avoid their eyes, not wanting to risk becoming the day's spiritual rumor snack. Back home, you set your groceries on the table and take in the stillness. Widowhood, real or assumed, creates a bubble of autonomy. You cook what you want. You manage your own finances. You answer to no husband monitoring your spending like it's a national threat. You let your mind wander into places society didn't design for you. Dreams, ideas, little rebellions disguised as normal days. The village sees you as a woman softened by grief, but the truth is quieter and sharper. You're learning to live on your own terms. Widowhood, with all its burdens, has carved out a corner of the world where you get to simply be, not a wife, not a daughter, not a servant to anyone's expectations. Just a woman surviving, rebuilding, reshaping her life, one small, steady act at a time. The house creaks gently. A pot bubbles on the hearth. You close the shutters and let the evening settle in like a warm sigh. And somewhere inside you, the realization grows. Freedom, in this age, often disguises itself as misfortune. You wake the next morning with a stretch that feels almost luxurious. Your spine crackles the way dry firewood does when it's thinking about catching flame. But you're used to that. The air carries that faintly sour smell of damp wood and last night's ashes, a scent that somehow becomes comforting when it's part of your daily rhythm. You sit up slowly, because sitting up quickly in this century is reserved for knights, panicked farmers, and people who just remembered they left dough rising overnight. As your eyes adjust, you're reminded of a label this world loves far too much. Spinster. A word tossed around like someone invented it specifically to make unmarried women sound like goblins lurking in attics. But the truth, far less dramatic and far more interesting, is that many women who lived alone weren't widows at all. They were simply never married women past whatever arbitrary age society decided counted as too old. Sometimes that age was 25, sometimes 20. Sometimes the moment she said no to a man with 4 teeth. And yet, the spinster lived on her own terms more than anyone realized. A mainstream historical fact glimmers through the room. In many regions, unmarried adult women, especially those who worked, were allowed to sign contracts, manage household finances, and even run small trades. They often out-earned younger married women because their income wasn't siphoned off into someone else's pockets. Historians still argue whether these freedoms emerged by necessity or by accident, whether societies genuinely allowed it or simply forgot to stop it. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and step outside. The morning fog hugs the ground in soft folds, blurring the world the way early mornings do in dreams. You walk with purpose today. Not too brisk, that's suspicious. Not too leisurely, that's laziness. But the perfect, I am busy and respectable but not interesting enough to gossip about. Pace. People notice you. They always do. Not because you're doing anything unusual, but because being unmarried and self-sufficient makes you the human equivalent of a mysterious locked chest in a video game. Everyone wants to poke it, inspect it, or assume it contains something dangerous. You walk toward the weaving shop, where you earn your coin. As you pass under a creaking sign, you hear a fringe tidbit you've picked up over the years. In some towns, unmarried women working in textile trades were believed to have delicate spiritual gifts because their spinning wheels made rhythmic sounds that locals claimed lulled spirits. Did ghosts actually enjoy medieval ASMR? Probably not, but people love explaining things with magic when they can't be bothered with logic. Inside the shop, you settle at your wheel. You feel the familiar weight of the spindle, hear the soft whir as fibers twist into thread. The motion is calming, hypnotic, repetitive enough to quiet the mind, but demanding enough to keep your fingers awake. Here, among the hum of tools and quiet chatter of other women, you are simply yourself. Not a wife, not a potential bride, not a widow to be pitied, just a worker. A person. A human being making something useful. A few younger girls whisper nearby. You catch bits of their conversation not about you for once, but about some poor man who accidentally washed his tunic in lye and now looks like he's wearing scorched snow. You smile to yourself. A tiny, private smile. Because humor is one of the things solitude gives you, you can laugh quietly without anyone asking what's so funny or whether you're laughing too much for a woman alone. By midday, you step outside into warm light. You tie your apron tighter and walk to the market to buy bread. The bread seller eyes you for a moment, then offers you a fresh loaf instead of the day-old one he usually tries to push onto unmarried women. Progress. Tiny, crumb-based progress. But you also feel the eyes of a few older villagers studying you. They don't trust spinsters. To them, you're unpredictable. A woman without a man is like a quill without an inkpot, unnatural to their worldview. A creature out of alignment with the cosmic filing system. One woman even mutters, "Women alone bring storms." Which is hilarious, because if you could summon storms, you would absolutely do it on laundry days, just to make your enemies rewash their sheets. You return home with your bread and settle onto the stool by the window. You look at the quiet street, and the quiet street looks back. You breathe. letting the weight of labels roll off your shoulders like water-down wax. Spinster. Unmarried. Odd. Unconventional. You've heard them all. And yet, as you sit in your small but entirely your own home, you feel something those labels never account for. The quiet strength of building a life that doesn't have to orbit someone else's authority. No one demands your time. No one interrupts your thoughts. No one dictates your meals, your clothes, your evenings, or the shape your future must take. Historians still argue whether spinsters were oppressed, liberated, isolated, admired, pitied, feared, or simply ignored. The truth is probably some messy combination of all those things. But living inside this moment, your moment, you understand something deeper. Solitude isn't a flaw, it's a force, a craft, a stubborn, steady way of surviving in a world built for someone else's script. And as the sun sinks low, casting gold across your walls, you feel that force settle into your bones like a quiet, defiant flame. You wake to the sound of rain tapping against your shutters, a soft, steady rhythm that feels almost like a lullaby from the sky itself. It's the kind of rain that doesn't soak you instantly, but soaks the world gradually, like a slow, thoughtful writer taking their time with every sentence. You stretch your arms, feeling the familiar stiffness in your shoulders, and sit up to face another day in a life that most of your neighbors can't quite categorize. Today, your thoughts drift towards something people rarely talk about openly. Women landowners? Yes, women like you who somehow manage property without a husband, father, uncle, brother, cousin, or disgruntled male neighbor looming over every decision. In this world, that makes you both an anomaly and a problem. Not the fun kind of problem, either the kind that forces village elders to gossip behind doors and ask, "Who let her do that?" as if you accidentally picked up someone else's destiny. You rise and step outside. The earth glistens like polished stone, and muddy footprints weave across the lane, small ones from children, bigger ones from work boots, and the occasional goat print from someone who gave up controlling their livestock years ago. You breathe in the cool dampness. It feels clean, like the world has washed away yesterday's judgments. Spoiler: the villagers will replace them shortly. A mainstream historical fact nudges into your memory. In many medieval and early modern regions, women, especially widows or unmarried women with inherited land, could legally own, lease, or manage property. It wasn't common, and it wasn't encouraged, but it was real. Historians still argue whether communities accepted this out of practicality, or simply to prevent land from going completely untended. You walk to your small patch of land beyond the village, a sliver of green, uneven but entirely yours. The boundary markers stand crookedly, as if even they are confused how you ended up owning them. You run your hand over one weathered stake, feeling the splintery wood under your palm. You've held onto this land through pestilence, taxation, gossip, and at least one overly enthusiastic horse. Land is power. Land is independence. Land is something people think only men should control, which is exactly why your ownership makes the roader. Elders sweat. As you inspect your cabbage rows, a mild joke forms in your mind. You grow vegetables so stubborn they practically count as medieval emotional support animals. The cabbages sit there silently, radiating the dignity of leafy boulders. You tug one gently, checking its progress, and whisper a little encouragement. No one is around to see you, but even if they were, it's still less odd than half the superstitions people swear by. Speaking of odd, you remember a fringe tidbit you once overheard from a traveling peddler. In some regions, unmarried women, landowners, were believed to have earth spirits' favor, as though the soil itself chose them. Because heaven forbid people acknowledge women are simply capable, without needing magical endorsement. By mid-morning, the rain softens to a mist. You walk toward the village mill to arrange the grinding of your grain. The miller sees you approaching and straightens his shirt, a gesture halfway between respectful and mildly terrified. Men never know how to talk to a woman holding property deeds. You greet him politely and hand over your sack of grain. He hesitates. "You're doing well with the land," he mutters, as if complimenting a toothache. You nod. Steadily. He scratches his beard, clearly wrestling with a question he's too polite to ask directly. Finally, he blurts out, "Who advised you on planting?" You smile, that patient, I will not laugh out loud smile. "I did." He nods slowly, his brain attempting to update its worldview like an old, grumpy operating system. On your walk home, a few villagers whisper, not loudly, but loud enough that you catch pieces of their theories. She must have a secret advisor, maybe a distant cousin, or a traveling lover who visits by moonlight. Nothing is more threatening to them than the idea you simply learned, observed, tried, adjusted, grew. You return home and run your fingers along the inside walls of your tiny house. Owning land has given you stability, a place no one can pull out from beneath you, unless they get creative with laws or rumors. And trust me, they often try. You light a small fire, the flames flickering against the stones. Managing your own property means managing everything. Fences, tools, disputes, boundaries, weeds, taxes, especially taxes. Authorities love taxing a solitary woman because, well, you can't argue with them, and also, do you have anyone who will take your side? No? Perfect. Penalty fee. Historians still argue whether these extra taxes were intentionally exploitative or simply bureaucratic incompetence. Honestly, judging from how often officials lose their inkpots and blame it on witches, it could go either way. Afternoon drifts in slowly. You work through your chores, patching a leaky roof tile, storing new grain behind your door, repairing a fence post. The goat community seems to consider a personal challenge. Each task anchors you deeper into your independence. Each action says, I am capable. I am here. This life is mine. But land ownership carries constant scrutiny too. People expect women like you to slip, fail, or suddenly reveal a secret man controlling everything. When you don't, they stare even harder. Yet the truth settles in your chest like a warm coal. Your success isn't accidental. Your life isn't a loophole. Your place in this village, unconventional as it is carved by your own hands. As evening settles, you step out onto your small patch of earth and breathe deeply. The world dims. The sky washes blue into purple. Your land, your work, your sweat, your independence glows softly under the twilight. And for a moment, everything feels steady. Everything feels earned. Everything feels undeniably, powerfully yours. You wake to the familiar groan of the wooden floorboards, an old, dependable sound, like the house itself is stretching its arms and grumbling about another day of responsibilities. You slip out, bed, and rub the sleep from your eyes, feeling the coolness of the morning settle into your skin. Today is workday, but then again, every day is workday, when you're a woman living alone in a century that believes independence is contagious and should probably be taxed. Your first thought is survival, not the dramatic kind with dragons or sword fights, but the quieter, more exhausting version, earning a living. Because eating is frowned upon unless you have money, and money is frowned upon unless a man gives it to you. Luckily, you didn't wait for anyone's permission. You step outside, basket in hand, and the air meets you with that early morning crispness that feels like someone opened a window in your lungs. The village is just beginning to stir. Smoke threads upward from chimneys. A dog trots past holding a stolen turnip the way a thief carries treasure. Someone shouts at someone else about spilled oats. Classic ambience. A mainstream historical fact clings to your thoughts. Unmarried or widowed women often worked in trades considered appropriate, like brewing, midwifery, spinning, baking, laundering, or herbal medicine. Some even ran alley houses, which honestly sounds like the perfect combination of income and stress. Historians still argue whether these trades were empowering or whether communities simply shoved women into undervalued, endless labor roles because men preferred jobs with fewer buckets involved. You start your day at your workbench by the window, yes, your window. The sunlight hits your tools, glinting off shears, needles, herbs, pots, and the one ladle you keep around because it doubles as a self-defense weapon if someone gets too bold at your door. Multi-purpose tools are essential in this era. Today, you're juggling 2 jobs because that's just how life works for you. You prepare thread for the weaver, and you're also making small herbal poultices requested by a few villagers. Not official medicine, oh no. Women weren't allowed to practice medicine unless it was under the supervision of old men who couldn't see past their own eyebrows. But household remedies? Acceptable. As long as they worked quietly and didn't threaten any man's sense of professional, well, anything. You crush mint, lavender, and a bit of dried yarrow, your hands moving with practiced rhythm. The scent rises, filling your home with something fresh and comforting. You hear a knock at the door and immediately brace yourself, not because danger lurks behind every door frame, but because villagers have a talent for making normal requests sound like accusations. It's Marta, a farmer's wife with a warm smile and permanently tired eyes. She hands you a small cloth pouch. "For the salve," she says softly. You nod and tuck the coins into your apron. Payment. Actual payment. The thrill never fades. She hesitates before leaving. "Some say you know herbs too well," she mutters. "They should mind their tongues." You snort under your breath the moment she's gone. Too well? As if the plants are going to file a complaint because you're familiar with them. But yes, that's the fringe tidbit of your daily life. Women skilled in herbalism often walked a razor-thin line between helpful healer and probable witch. It depended on the weather, the moon, and how much the local priest slept the night before. By midday, you pack your finished bundles and head to the market. The sun warms your shoulders. A few villagers greet you. One man steps aside politely, as though you're a small storm cloud that might rain disappointment on him. You catch wind of a whisper. "She's clever with her hands." Depending on the context, that can mean either respect or suspicion. Today, it's probably both. At the market, you barter for flour and a new iron needle. The merchant weighs your coins carefully, too carefully. Some men treat women's earnings like they're counterfeit, simply because no husband supervised the transaction. But after a moment, he nods and hands you the goods. A win is a win. On the way home, you pass the town crier posting new notices. One catches your attention. A rule prohibiting women from selling certain goods after dark. The reasoning? The authorities claim it's for their safety, but historians still argue whether this was protective or yet another method of limiting women's financial independence. Based on your experience, the answer is obvious. You spend the afternoon sewing a neighbor's torn garment, weaving thread through fabric with a meditative rhythm. It's the kind of work that quiets your mind. You imagine the garment whispering, "You again? Didn't we do this last week?" Clothes in this century fall apart faster than your patience on market day. Evening settles like a warm shawl. You sit at your table, counting the day's coins. Not many. Never enough. But they're yours. Every single one earned by skills, sweat, effort, and the ability to survive without being legally tethered to a man. That's the truth they never say aloud. A woman living alone isn't some fragile little curiosity. She's a worker of three trades: a negotiator, an economist, a strategist, a quietly stubborn force holding herself together in a society that waits for her to trip. But you don't trip. You work. You build. You endure. You carve a narrow living out of the world with steady hands. And tomorrow, you'll do it again, because survival, for you, isn't a single act. It's a daily craft. You wake in the quiet just before dawn, the hour when even the birds aren't sure if they're supposed to be awake yet. Your house lies still, wrapped in that fragile hush that only exists in the earliest slice of morning. You sit up slowly, listening. In this era, listening is survival. A woman who lives alone must learn the language of creaks, taps, and shifting roof tiles, the same way a sailor learns tides. And today, as you run your fingers along the wall beside your bed, you feel again the truth you live with daily. Your home is not just a home, it's your shield. You rise, tie your shawl tight, and light a small tallow candle. The flame flickers wildly for a moment, as if protesting the early hour. The light carves faint shadows across the cramped space around you. A single bed, a stool that wobbles like it has dramatic tendencies, shelves holding herbs and tools, and the tiny chest where you hide your coins because secrecy is cheaper than a lock. A mainstream historical fact presses gently against your thoughts. Women who lived alone often built their houses with reinforced doors, barred shutters, or internal wooden beams, not because they expected war, but because nighttime visitors weren't always friendly. Historians still argue whether single women were genuinely targeted more often, or if communities simply assumed danger lurked around them due to their unprotected status. Either way, the tension was always there. You walk to the front door and lift the heavy crossbeam securing it. The wood is thick, rough under your fingertips, and heavier than it looks intentionally so. You carved it yourself, not because it's perfect, but because it's solid, because the night is long, because you never know which footstep outside belongs to a neighbor, a stray dog, or someone who drank too much ale and forgot his own address. Then there's the hearth, your anchor. You kneel to blow gently on the embers. They kindle back to life like stubborn old spirits who refuse to retire. Fire is comfort. Fire is warmth. Fire is protection. But there is also a fringe tidbit that once made you laugh harder than you should have. In some communities, unmarried women were not allowed to let their hearth fire go out after sunset because neighbors believed the darkness inside an unlit home attracted restless spirits. Imagine being blamed for ghosts because you ran out of firewood at the wrong hour. The light grows as dawn pushes its way across your window. You take a slow walk around your tiny domain. You examine each shutter, closed tight, each beam, firmly braced, each bowl, cloth, or tool in its place. Living alone means your household is a miniature fortress, a place where both vigilance and peace have to coexist like mismatched roommates. As you sweep the floor, you feel the faint dent in the boards near the back wall, a reminder of the time you dropped a full water bucket and nearly startled yourself into retirement. You sweep by it every morning now, and it has become a strange comfort. That dent is living proof that you have survived clumsiness, exhaustion, and gravity simultaneously. By mid-morning, you step outside to fetch water from the well. Your home stands sturdy behind you, shaped by your hands, your labor, your need to feel safe. It isn't luxurious, it isn't grand, but it is yours. A sanctuary you've built inch by inch. As you walk, a neighbor, a woman named Helda, passes by. She eyes the beam lodged across your doorframe and remarks, "You sleep like someone expects trouble." You smile faintly, "Don't you?" She grunts in agreement, because honestly, nobody in this century sleeps soundly, not even the cows. With water fetched, you return home and set the bucket down. The door creaks softly as it closes, the sound now familiar enough to be almost affectionate. You secure the latch, then the beam, then because habit is both friend and jailer, check it again. You work through your tasks, mending shirts, hanging herbs to dry, grinding grain, repairing a loose stool leg that insists on misbehaving. Each task is small, ordinary, even boring. But for a woman living alone, these chores aren't just housekeeping, they're maintenance of the fragile ecosystem that keeps you safe. Mid-afternoon sunlight pours through your small window. The warmth softens your shoulders. You sit at your table, sipping a thin soup that tastes like vegetables remembering better days. You listen to the world outside, murmured conversations, distant hammering, a goat bleating indignantly at something only it can perceive. Your home absorbs it all, holding you quietly. It is both barrier and cradle. There's tension in this life, yes, but there is pride too. You built a functioning home out of limited means and abundant resilience. And as you lean back and gaze around the room, you understand a truth that historians still argue about, but you feel in your bones. A woman who keeps her own house without permission, without oversight, without male supervision, is practicing a form of quiet rebellion. And every board, beam, and brick of your little shelter is a whisper of defiance. Evening approaches, soft and slow. You light a new candle and slide the wooden beam back across your door. The sound of it falling into place is soft, solid, grounding. A lullaby in wood. Your home becomes a cocoon again, wrapping you in safety, routine, and the quiet satisfaction of having survived another day by your own hands. You wake the next morning to a sound you know too well. The faint murmur of voices outside your window. Not angry voices, not panicked voices, worse. Whispering voices. The gossip network is awake early today, brewing theories with the same enthusiasm other people reserve for breakfast. You sit up slowly, running a hand through your hair, giving yourself a moment before stepping into the role you play every day. The woman whose life is apparently everybody's favorite side quest. You stand by the shutter and pause, listening not out of fear, but because information is currency in this century. One voice says, "She was out late." Another adds, "No, the candle burned long, but I didn't see her." A third hums thoughtfully, "She's too quiet. Quiet people hide things." Which is hilarious, because if you were too loud, they'd say you were unruly. Medieval society had two settings, not enough woman or too much woman. You sigh, tie your hair, and step into your day. The moment you open your front door, the street feels different. Not tense, just watchful. Eyes track you like you're a passing comet that could mean good or bad omens depending on who interprets the tale. A mainstream historical fact presses into your mind. In many European villages, informal gossip courts acted as social policing systems that judged women, especially unmarried ones, based on behavior, nighttime lights, visitors, laundry habits, and even how often their chimney smoked. Historians still argue whether these networks functioned as protective community vigilance or as socially sanctioned surveillance against vulnerable women. Based on your daily experience, it's definitely the second option. You walk toward the well, bucket in hand, and feel the whispers follow you like threads pulling at your clothes. Marta, the miller's wife, nods respectfully. The others observe. You offer a polite smile that says, "I am a normal person doing normal things. Please do not assign me a mythological backstory today." Gossip, in this world, is not entertainment. It's regulation. A system. A public court without rules, laws, or logic. Its judges are everyone. Its evidence is anything. Its verdict is permanent. As you reach the well, two older women whisper about someone else for once. You overhear the tail end, and her laundry was still wet by sunset. You can practically feel the scandal radiating off them. Medieval laundry politics are intense. You lower your bucket carefully. The rope creaks. The water sloshes. You haul it up without making a splash, not because you care about getting wet, but because a splash turns instantly into... She rushed. Why rush? Something startled her. Probably a man. Or a demon. Or a demon man. People in this era jump to conclusions faster than cats jump onto freshly cleaned tables. As you walk home, you remember a fringe tidbit you heard from a traveling storyteller. In some regions, women living alone were believed to have whispering fences, meaning neighbors claimed the very fences around their houses told secrets. Not metaphorically. Literally. They said, wood absorbed sin, which is impressive, because those same neighbors refused to absorb logic. Back inside your house, you set the bucket down and breathe in the quiet. You think about something nobody admits. Gossip affects your survival. It determines who will trade with you, hire you, defend you, or avoid you. A single rumor, real or invented, can shift everything. And because you have no husband, your reputation is your only currency besides actual currency. Later, when you head to the market to deliver some sewing work, the gossip network hums louder. A man glances at you with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. A few women whisper behind their baskets. Someone tries to greet you but does it awkwardly, as if you might spontaneously turn into a crow. You keep walking. Calm, measured, unbothered. You've learned the art of being visible without becoming a spectacle. At the seamstress's stall, you deliver the mended garments. The seamstress, Ellen, smiles warmly. "You work neatly," she says. That compliment means more than it sounds. She's aligning herself publicly with you. That alone could spark new chatter by sunset. On the walk home, a boy runs past, announcing something gleefully. "They say you talk to the moon." You laugh out. Loud, not because it's true, but because it's the most flattering rumor you've heard all month. If only the moon would talk back, you'd ask it to handle the night watch and give you one evening without human commentary. Back home, as you stir a pot of thin stew, you reflect on the strange balance you navigate. Gossip can harm you, yes, but it can also make you sharp, observant, quietly strategic. You learn who listens, who speaks, who invents, who protects, and who watches your window at night. Historians still argue whether gossip networks oppressed women or empowered them by providing warning systems and information flow. Living inside one, though, you know the truth is complicated. Gossip controls, but it also reveals patterns. It's dangerous, yet predictable. Cruel, yet occasionally rarely useful. Evening settles around your little home. You close the shutters, set the beam across the door, and sit by the window with a cup of weak tea. Outside, the gossip finally fades. The street grows still. The world becomes quiet enough for your heartbeat to set the rhythm. And in that quiet, one realization comes softly. A woman living alone survives not by avoiding gossip, but by learning how to move through it like mist. Never too solid, never too still, never letting it catch hold of your truth. You feel the change before you see it. It starts the way these things always start, not with thunder or a dramatic omen in the sky, but with a slightly longer pause in people's greetings. A hesitation at the well, a conversation that stops just a bit too abruptly when you walk past. The world around you tilts half a degree, and suddenly, you're no longer just the woman who lives alone. You're the woman people are beginning to suspect. You step outside into the morning light, basket in hand. The air is clear, sharp, almost too clean, as if the day has been freshly scrubbed in preparation for something. You feel eyes on you from a window. A curtain shifts. A shutter closes just a fraction too slowly. You've lived alone long enough to recognize this particular weather pattern. The sky is quiet, but the storm is absolutely people-shaped. As you walk toward the well, you notice a small cluster of villagers standing closer together than usual. They're not arguing. They're agreeing. That's never good. One of them glances your way, then immediately looks at the ground as if the dirt suddenly became interesting. Another woman crosses herself. You'd be flattered if it didn't feel like she's warding off your entire existence. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind like an unwelcome draft. In early modern Europe, a significant number of people accused of witchcraft were older, unmarried women, or widows, especially those who lived alone, used herbs, or didn't conform to expected roles. Historians still argue whether these accusations were driven mostly by misogyny, religious panic, economic jealousy, or just a catastrophic lack of indoor hobbies. You lower your bucket into the well, listening to the rope creak, the water echo. Behind you, the whispers are not even pretending to be quiet anymore. She knows herbs, someone says. She burns a candle late, adds another. She doesn't need a man. A third mutters darkly, as if that alone proves supernatural involvement. You haul the bucket up steadily. If they're going to narrate your life like a cautionary tale, you might as well at least have fresh water for it. On your way back, a boy runs past, staring at you with wide eyes. They say you can curse people with a look, he blurts. You blink. Slowly. Deliberately. Wouldn't I be using that more often if I could? You ask, deadpan. He thinks about it, and actually nods, as if your logic has mildly comforted him. Back inside your house, you close the door and let the quiet settle over you. The beam slides into place with a soft thud, more necessary today than yesterday. You lean your back against the door for a moment, feeling the grain of the wood press into your shoulder blades. It's not that danger has arrived yet, but you can hear it walking up the road. You move through your morning tasks, grinding grain, stirring a pot, checking the herbs you hung to dry. The air smells of sage, thyme, and something sharper from the yarrow bundle. It's comforting to you. To your neighbors, apparently, it smells like evidence. You remember a fringe tidbit you once heard from a traveling storyteller. In some villages, people believed witches could steal milk from cows simply by staring at the barn and muttering a rhyme. If milk soured, if butter didn't churn, if cheese misbehaved, it was never the cow's fault, or the weather's, or the hygiene. No, clearly, it was your fault, because you once looked at a cow while thinking about something else. By midday, there's a knock on your door. A sharp, official knock. Not the gentle rap of a friend, or the hurried tap of someone in need, but the flat sound of obligation. You open it to find two figures, the village priest and one of the elders. Their expressions are careful, arranged somewhere between concern and accusation. The priest fidgets with his rosary. The elder clears his throat like he's about to deliver a tax notice or a moral lecture, and honestly, you're not sure which would be worse. We've heard talk, the elder says. Of course you have, you think. Talk travels faster than carts and never pays road fees. The priest adds, they say your candle burns late. They say people come to you for remedies. His voice is soft, but the words land heavily. They say you prefer your own company. You fight the urge to point out that your candle burns late because mending by moonlight is terrible for the eyes, and people come to you because they prefer not to die of treatable ailments. Instead, you keep your tone calm, steady, almost bored. People talk, you say. People always talk. They step inside, glancing around your small home. Their eyes land on your herbs, your worn books, your bundles of dried plants. The priest picks up a sprig of lavender like it might bite him. These are for sleep, you explain gently. For pain, for stomach trouble. He sets it down like it just confessed to a crime. Historians still argue whether clergy truly believed in every whispered accusation of witchcraft, or whether they sometimes used the charge as a convenient tool to reinforce authority, settle grudges, or calm frightened communities that insisted something or someone had to be blamed. The elder's gaze falls on a small mark on your wall, a simple symbol you carved long ago to track the seasons. His eyes narrow. What does that mean, he asks. It means I'm forgetful. You reply dryly. It tells me when to plant cabbages. There's a long pause. For a heartbeat, you don't know which way this will turn. Then the priest sighs. A long, tired sound. You must be careful, he murmurs. Don't invite more suspicion. Close your shutters earlier. Be mindful of who visits you. And perhaps burn fewer herbs so late. You nod, because arguing with fear never works. Fear doesn't care about proof. Fear wants a story. And right now, you are dangerously close to being cast in the role of villain. After they leave, the house feels smaller for a moment. The walls closer. You move slowly, touching each familiar object like you're reassuring both it and yourself. The beam, the stool, the table smooth under your palms, the herbs hanging quietly, as if they're trying not to be noticed. You sit down and let your thoughts unspool. You've always known that living alone made you vulnerable to this exact narrative. No husband to vouch for your purity. No male relative to stand between you and accusations. You are a woman with knowledge, skills, and privacy, all things that make certain kinds of people deeply uncomfortable. If a child recovers after you give them a remedy, people nod in grudging respect. If a child worsens after you give them a remedy, people wonder what you really did. If a storm destroys crops, people ask who angered God. If you were seen near the field that week, people quietly answer their own question. You remember, with a flicker of bleak humor, that some communities once used tests to prove witchcraft, like tossing a suspected woman into water to see if she floated. Float? Guilty? Sink? Innocent, but inconveniently drowned. You can't help thinking that whoever invented that had never met water before. As dusk settles, you light your candle and pull your shutters closed. You check the beam twice, listening to the solid sound of wood slotting into place. Your little fortified home becomes your world again. The danger isn't immediate, not yet, but it's circling, wearing familiar faces, asking polite questions with heavy implications. And so tonight, more than ever, you move carefully. You bank your fire. You keep your light low. You let your own breathing slow until it matches the rhythm of the house. Because in this era, for a woman living alone, surviving accusation is its own kind of quiet magic. Not spells, not curses, just vigilance, restraint, timing, and the stubborn refusal to let other people's fears decide who you are. You wake the next morning to a world that feels oddly polite. Too polite. The kind of politeness that makes the hairs on your neck rise because it usually means everyone has agreed to pretend something isn't happening. The accusations, the whispers, the side eyes, they haven't disappeared. They've simply slipped on nice clothing and decided to stroll quietly. You sit up, stretch your aching shoulders, and take in the soft morning light filtering across your floor. It almost feels peaceful. Almost, but not quite, because today you must navigate one of the most exhausting parts of living alone without a man. Respectability. Respectability here is not about dignity or goodness. It's about performance. You must appear proper, predictable, unremarkable. A woman alone must not only live correctly, she must look correct doing it. You dress carefully. Modest skirt, sturdy apron, plain shawl. Nothing too bright, too fitted, or too elegant. You can practically hear the village. Commentary. Did you see her? Wearing red? Alone? Suspicious. A mainstream historical fact drifts across your thoughts. Unmarried or widowed women were often expected to wear specific colors, cuts, and accessories to signal social status and moral safety. Too much fashion meant vanity. Too little meant neglect. Historians still argue whether these expectations were meant to protect single women or simply to monitor them more easily. You braid your hair not too loose, lest someone claims you're inviting trouble. Not too tight, lest someone says you're trying too hard. You secure it with a wooden pin and sigh. In this era, your hair alone carries more politics than an entire royal council. Outside, the village hums with life. Children chase each other through puddles. A man shouts at a stubborn donkey. Women cluster in doorways, pretending to sweep while gathering intel at professional speed. You step out and keep your posture straight, shoulders relaxed, steps steady. Respectability rule 1. Walk like a person who has absolutely nothing unusual to hide. The irony, of course, is that the people who act like they have nothing to hide always look suspicious. As you move toward the market, a few villagers nod at you, performative civility, but you'll take it. One older woman tugs on her granddaughter's sleeve and whispers loudly enough for a tree to hear. That one keeps to herself. The granddaughter nods solemnly, as if receiving ancient wisdom. Honestly, children in this century learn gossip techniques faster than they learn to read. You carry your basket of mended garments to the seamstress's stall. Ellen greets you with a warm smile, her hands stained from dye and work. "You look well today," she says quietly. "Just keeping the peace," you reply. She chuckles. "Respectability is exhausting." "Yes," you say, "but it beats accusations." She winces in agreement. You head toward the baker next. Your steps are calm, your gaze steady, your expression neutral, because here comes respectability rule 2. Do not look too excited about anything. Excitement invites questions. Questions invite rumors. Rumors invite priests. At the baker's stall, you buy a small loaf. The baker's son hands it to you with exaggerated caution, as if the bread might combust in your witchy, woman-alone hands. You smile sweetly and take it anyway. As you head home, you overhear two men discussing you because people here love talking loudly when they think you can't hear. "She's proper enough," one says. "For now," the other grunts. "But women alone must be watched." You resist the urge to turn around and inform them that women don't spontaneously turn into wolves at sundown. Back home, you prepare a simple stew. A pot of vegetables simmers, filling the air with a comforting, earthy smell. You move through small tasks, tidying, sweeping, folding clothes, each one reinforcing the delicate image you're forced to uphold. A fringe tidbit crosses your mind. Some communities held a belief that a woman's respectability could be judged by the sound of her broom. A tidy sweep was virtuous. A chaotic or loud sweep meant you were disorderly, emotional, or possibly hiding sins under your floorboards. Honestly, if you ever invent time travel, you're bringing a vacuum just to watch their faces. Later in the afternoon, you sit by your window mending a tear in your shawl. This is the most socially approved posture a woman alone can have. Productive, serene, visible but not too visible. Respectable domesticity puts people at ease. If you were writing or reading, they'd worry you were learning subversive thoughts. If you were singing, they'd whisper that you were summoning something. If you were napping well, that's laziness, and laziness is sin, apparently. The hours drift. Your hands move steadily. The world outside continues its quiet surveillance. Historians still argue whether women living alone adapted respectability norms to protect themselves, or whether society imposed these rules to contain women who didn't fit traditional households. Living it firsthand, you see the answer clearly. It's both. Survival here is part strategy, part performance. As evening draws near, you prepare for your most important task, the nighttime respectability ritual. You close your shutters early, sweep your threshold, blow out your candle at a socially acceptable hour. Ensure no visitors come after sunset, because a woman with a late-night candle sparks rumors, and a woman with nighttime visitors sparks torches and pitchforks. When you finally slide the wooden beam across your door, you feel the weight of the day settle across your shoulders. Respectability is a performance that never ends, a balancing act with no applause. But behind your locked door, in the privacy of your tiny home, you breathe freely again, because in here, you no longer have to be proper or predictable. You can just be a woman, quiet, tired, independent, and wholly yourself. You wake to soft morning light slanting through the shutters, painting thin, golden lines across your table. For a moment, you lie still, listening to the quiet, your quiet. A single woman's quiet. It's not grand or dramatic, but it's yours alone. And yet, you know better than anyone that solitude doesn't mean isolation. Not truly. Not when the world is dangerous in small, mundane ways, and you have to be as strategic with your social ties as with your coin purse. Today, your thoughts drift towards something that quietly sustains you in this life. Female friendship. Not the pretty, embroidered kind written about in courtly poems, no. The real kind. The practical, whispered, quietly fierce alliances that single women formed to survive a world that wanted them fragile, visible, and easily monitored. You dress and step outside to the soft chatter of the village morning. The air smells like damp, thatch, fresh bread, and the faint scent of someone with too many onions in their breakfast. Children run past in chaotic zigzags. A rooster struts proudly as though he personally invented dawn. And at the far end of the street, you see them, your circle. Not a coven, not a conspiracy, not a formal club. Just three other women who also live alone for their own reasons. Widowhood, abandonment, stubbornness, or that very specific personality type, medieval men often labeled as difficult. You join them near the well. No announcement, no official greeting, just a shared nod that says, "We see you, we understand you, and yes, we survived another night." Congrats to all. A mainstream historical fact softens into your mind. In many communities, single women, especially widows and unmarried artisans, formed informal mutual aid networks. They shared food, watched each other's homes, helped with illness, lent tools, and even defended one another publicly when rumors turned sharp. Historians still argue whether these alliances were subtle rebellions or simply practical survival strategies. You suspect the answer, as usual, is, why not both? Helda, the widow with the iron spine and surprisingly soft heart, hands you a bundle of herbs she gathered. "For your cough," she says, even though you coughed one time yesterday. Affection expressed through preventative plant-based intervention. Beside her stands Lysa, younger than the rest of you but fierce in ways that make you think she will outlive the entire village through sheer spite. She shifts her basket and mutters, "Old Roan is spreading tales again." Roan is the unofficial village rumor merchant, impressive, considering he somehow manages to be wrong about everything. And finally, Marin, a quiet, watchful woman who says little but sees everything. The villagers call her strange. You call her reliable. You all stand together, drawing strength from the shared understanding that the village may not respect you individually, but collectively. Together, you form something almost mythological. A cluster of women who aren't sad, desperate, or waiting for rescue. Simply functioning. That alone unsettles people. You walk with them toward the market. Along the way, you pass a fringe tidbit someone once told you. In certain alpine villages, women living alone created rotating night guard routines, one woman staying awake to listen for danger while the others slept. Not an official system, not approved. Just women quietly refusing to be easy targets. Your own group has a similar unspoken arrangement. When one of you is ill, the others bring food. When one of you is threatened, the others appear without being called. When someone needs a man's name on a document, Helda's late husband approves from beyond the grave with remarkable consistency. The market is busy today. People eye your group the way one might eye a group of cats who appear to be plotting. Something but nobody says anything. Not directly. You make your purchases, trade a few small goods, and stand shoulder to shoulder with your companions as vendors try, and fail, to cheat you. When a merchant attempts to overcharge Marin for grain, Helda steps forward with the terrifying calm of a woman who has survived both marriage and winter shortages. "That price," she says, "is for fools. Try again." The merchant adjusts the price instantly. Even rumor spreaders fear Helda. Later, as you walk home with your bundles, Lysa leans close and whispers, "If anyone comes asking questions again, tell them you were with us." It's not a request, it's a vow. You feel warmth settle inside your ribs. Not romantic warmth, not familial warmth, something steadier. The warmth of people who choose you, not because they have to, but because you survive the world in similar ways. By late afternoon, the four of you sit together outside Helda's house mending tools. You talk in low, calm voices about nothing and everything, weather, bread prices, goat misbehavior, which households are fighting again. This quiet gossip isn't malicious, it's strategic. Information shared among women who cannot afford to be uninformed. Historians still argue whether these circles were proto-feminist alliances, community glue, or simply the natural outcome of shared burdens. Sitting here now, you feel the truth more clearly than any scholar. This is survival braided with tenderness. As the sun lowers, you head home, alone, but not unsupported. When you slide your beam across your door that night, you feel safer knowing 3 other doors nearby have beams just like it. 3 sets of eyes notice when your candle goes out. 3 women will hear if something happens in the dark. Female friendship here is not decorative. It is not optional. It is not trivial. It is the quiet infrastructure of your life, invisible to the people who judge you, but essential to everything that keeps you alive. You wake to the sound of church bells drifting faintly through the morning air, slow, heavy chimes that seem to announce not just the hour, but the fact that everyone in the village is officially awake and therefore ready to overanalyze your personal life again. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, feeling that familiar blend of fatigue and resilience settle across your shoulders. Today, your thoughts drift towards something more dangerous than solitude, herbs, or late-night candles combined. Love. Or even worse in this century, rumors of love. You dress quietly, choosing the most unremarkable garments you own. You smooth your hair, pin it simply, and step outside with a slow, controlled breath. The street is alive with chatterbakers calling out prices, hens clucking like tiny feathered politicians, children darting between houses like unsupervised lightning bolts. But the moment you step outside, the tone shifts ever so slightly. People glance at you with that look. Not the witchcraft look, not the spinster look. This one is far more complicated and far more inconvenient. The, is she seeing someone? Look, you can practically hear the plot forming in the collective mind of the village, like a bad song everyone hums at the same time. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your thoughts. Unmarried women, especially those living alone, were often judged by an impossibly fragile standard of moral reputation. A single rumor of impropriety could ruin their status, reduce their economic opportunities, or even invite religious intervention. Historians still argue whether these values were rooted in religious anxiety, patriarchal control, or simple fear of women owning their own choices. Somehow, the answer is all three. As you head toward the market, Helda rushes up beside you, eyebrows raised. "Someone saw a man at your door last night," she says without preamble. You blink. "A man!" she snorts. The priest's cat knocked over a pot, and apparently that counts. You close your eyes for a moment, inhaling the world's most exhausted sigh. In this place, the mere idea of male proximity is enough to ignite speculation. Last year, a widow in a nearby village was accused of scandal because a travelling cobbler asked for directions to the bakery while standing slightly closer than socially acceptable. You walk on, careful not to quicken your pace. Quickening your pace implies evasion. Evasion implies guilt. The entire village's moral compass is basically operated by toddlers. At the well, two older women watch you like hawks observing a suspiciously independent pigeon. One whispers, "She looked flushed yesterday." The other replies, "Perhaps she entertained someone." Flushed, you recall, simply meant you were chopping wood in the sun. You lower your bucket into the well with calm precision, as though the rope itself might report back to the gossips if you tugged too fast. On your way back, you pass a group of men repairing a fence. One of them, Tomas, the beekeeper's son, gives you an awkward nod. He's harmless, shy, soft-spoken, and unfortunately, exactly the type village rumor mills pick as the perfect secret suitor, because he once returned your dropped spindle. You nod politely and keep walking. Mistake. Two women nearby gasp softly, as though they've just witnessed a royal affair. By midday, the rumor has matured like cheese left out in summer, pungent, overripe, and definitely not based on reality. You hear snippets as you walk. They say she has a sweetheart. No, someone said a night visitor. A man from another village, perhaps. Or maybe a soldier. Soldiers are always trouble. She was humming yesterday. That means something. You were humming because stew turned out well for once. Apparently happiness is now evidence. A fringe tidbit drifts into memory. In some communities, women accused of romantic impropriety had their bed straw inspected for signs of male presence. You don't even want to know what they expected to find. Medieval detection methods were both invasive and scientifically laughable. You head to Ellen, the seamstress, to deliver some mended clothing. She meets your eyes knowingly. "Rough day?" she asks. "The roughest." Ellen hands you a piece of bread, not as payment, not as pity, but as a universal sign of female solidarity. "Here, eat this before you say something that gets you lectured by a priest." In the afternoon, you stop by Lisa's home. She sits outside, sharpening a knife with such intensity that anyone watching would immediately reconsider gossiping within earshot. You tell her what you've heard. She rolls her eyes so hard, you think she might sprain something. "If you had a lover," she says flatly, "I'd know first." You shrug. Apparently the entire village thinks they'd know first. She snorts. "Let them talk. They get bored and talk anyway." But this time, you can feel the rumor stretching, growing legs. Gossip about love is never just gossip. Not for you. Not here. A single romantic suspicion can transform you from independent woman to morally questionable woman, and that shift carries consequences. Near sunset, as you walk home, you pass the priest. He pauses mid-step, looks at you for a moment too long, and gently clears his throat. Ah, that throat clear, the universal prelude to moral guidance. My child, he begins softly, be mindful of appearances. You smile politely. Always. He nods, satisfied with your vague diplomacy, and walks on. Historians still argue whether religious figures genuinely sought to protect single women or whether they felt obligated to supervise female morality because society demanded it. Living here, you know the truth. Sometimes, kindness and control arrived in the same tone of voice. You reach home. You lock your door. You slide the beam across with practiced ease. In the D, quiet, you sit by your candle and feel the weight of the day settle over you like dust. The truth is simple, sharp, and unfair. For a woman living alone, love is a luxury. Romance is a risk. Rumors are weapons. And even silence, even neutrality, can be twisted into scandal just because someone was bored enough to do it. You breathe slowly, watching the candle flame flicker. Your life is yours, no matter what stories swirl outside your walls. And while you may not control the gossip, you control your truth. And sometimes, that is the only power you need. You wake in the grey hush before sunrise, when the world feels half-formed, like a painting still wet at the edges. The room is cool, quiet, and faintly perfumed with dried lavender from the bundle hanging over your window. You stretch beneath your blanket, letting the peaceful moment linger before the day and the village start tugging at you again. But today, your mind drifts toward a deeper, older layer of your life, something beneath gossip, beyond chores, older than taxes and expectations. Faith, magic, ritual, the blend of belief that women like you quietly carry. In this world, religion is everywhere. Bells, sermons, festivals, rules. But beneath that official layer lies a softer, secret landscape of charms, whispered prayers, protective symbols, and rituals passed down through hands, not books. Things learned from grandmothers, neighbors, wandering healers, and the occasional elderly man who believes onions cure heartbreak. You rise and dress, slipping your fingers over. The small wooden charm hanging beside your bed. It's simple, a smooth circle carved with a tiny cross and a shallow swirl pattern. Harmless, practical. You tell any visitor it's a house blessing. But in truth, it's older than any church record. Your mother carved it. Her mother gave her the design. Before that, who knows? A mainstream historical fact settles gently into your thoughts. Ordinary people in medieval Europe often blended Christian practices with folk magic charms, herbal rites, moon phase planting, protective symbols, whispered invocations. This mixture wasn't rare. It was normal. Historians still argue where faith ended and magic began, but the people who lived it never separated the two. You step outside to the early dawn breeze. The village is still asleep, or pretending to be. Smoke curls lazily from a few chimneys. A lone rooster begins his daily scream session. Dew glistens on the grass like tiny glass beads. As you head to the well, you slip a sprig of rosemary into your pocket. For protection, yes, but also because it smells nice and keeps insects away. Practical magic, the best kind. You pass Marin's house. She steps out silently, as she always does. You nod, and she returns the gesture. You notice she's tied a small piece of red ribbon around her doorframe. She does that every spring to ward off bad luck. People whisper about it. Of course, because people whisper about everything. But she shrugs it off. It keeps the hens laying, she once said. That's proof enough for her. At the well, the water glistens dark and deep. You toss in a tiny pinch of salt, just a small flick from your fingers, because your grandmother taught you that water likes to be reminded it is alive. You don't fully understand the meaning, but the gesture grounds you, connects you. Two younger women arrive, and one gives you a curious look. She probably saw your small motion, but she doesn't comment. Instead, she murmurs, a quiet, unofficial morning blessing under her breath, half prayer, half folk rhyme about good weather. Everyone has their little rituals. They just pretend they don't. Later that morning, you're preparing your herbs, hanging some, bundling others, when you pause to whisper a small phrase over a jar of dried mint. Not a spell, not a charm, just a few words you learned long ago that help you steady your thoughts. The kind of phrase the church doesn't entirely approve of, but also doesn't entirely condemn. That ambiguous zone is where most women live. You think back to something Helda once told you. Faith is what we say in the open. Magic is what we whisper. She said it while stirring a pot of onion broth with the intensity of someone fighting off 3 illnesses at once. You smile, remembering it. Midday arrives. You walk to the market, passing by houses with tiny hints of hidden beliefs, chalk marks on thresholds, herbs tucked beneath eaves, shoes placed oddly at, doors to confuse spirits or rats. The two are often confused. A fringe tidbit pops into your mind. In some villages, women would bury iron keys under their floorboards as protection against night wanderers, a term vague enough to include ghosts, thieves, men with questionable intentions, and possibly raccoons, if raccoons existed here. The key didn't unlock anything. It simply stood for safety. When you reach the market, you hear a heated debate. 2 men arguing about whether lightning strikes happen because of weather or because someone angered the saints. The answer, obviously, is that lightning happens because clouds get dramatic, but you keep this opinion to yourself. In public, you nod piously. In private, you roll your eyes. Ellen waves you over. She leans close and whispers. The priest says people must rely on prayer, but yesterday he asked me to sew a protective charm into his cloak. She snorts. Men pretend they don't believe in magic. Women actually keep everyone alive. Back home, you light a small candle for the evening. Not a ritual, exactly, but rituals don't always announce themselves. They live in repetition, in comfort, in meaning quietly placed inside everyday actions. You warm a broth. You tidy your tools. You touch the wooden charm by your bed again, feeling the groove beneath your thumb. Historians still argue whether women's folk practices were resistance, superstition, therapy, or religion in disguise. But sitting here in the dim glow of your home, you know what they really are. They are survival in a world where danger wears many faces. They are comfort when life is unpredictable. They are control when you have so little control. You sip your broth, listening to the night settle. Outside, the wind sighs through the trees. Inside, you feel held by old words, by old wisdom, by the invisible thread that ties you to generations of women before you. Faith, magic, ritual, not separate things, not scandalous things. Just part of being a woman who survives the world, quietly, steadily, mysteriously, on her own terms. You rise before dawn, the sky still a deep blue bruising into grey, and for a moment you lie still, listening to the quiet thrum of your little house. It's travel day, not a grand journey, not an adventure sung by poets, but the simple act of walking from one village to another. And in this era, that simple act is one of the most dangerous things a woman alone can do. You dress carefully. Sturdy shoes, shawl pinned tight, a small bundle of bread, dried apples, and a piece of hard cheese that could double as a weapon if necessary. You check the wooden beam across your door one last time before lifting it away. The grain of the wood presses into your palms, a reminder that home is your fortress, and leaving it is always a calculated risk. A mainstream historical fact hums through your thoughts. Medieval and early modern women rarely travelled alone. When they did, it required permits, escorts, or written letters of passage, sometimes from a male relative, sometimes from local officials. Historians still argue whether these rules were genuinely for protection or simply another way to control women's movement. From where you stand, adjusting your shawl, the answer is painfully obvious. The village is quiet as you step into the street. Smoke curls from only a handful of chimneys. A dog lifts its head in mild interest, then flops back down. You walk with even, steady steps, the kind that say, "I am going where I must, nothing more," to anyone watching from behind shutters. You're heading to the next village over to deliver herbal poultices to a farmer's wife. It's only a few miles, but between here and there lies a road flanked by forest, marsh, and the always unsettling possibility of running into someone with too much time and too little moral fibre. Helda meets you at the edge of the village. She presses a small iron nail into your hand. "For the road," she says. "Keep it in your pocket. Iron against spirits, iron against fear, iron against luck, take your pick." You slip it into your pocket gratefully. The path stretches ahead, winding between fields still dark with early morning shade. You walk briskly, but not too briskly. Travel etiquette rule number 1. Do not look like prey. Shoulders square. Steps sure. Eyes forward. But also, do not look like a challenge. Challenges invite tests. Tests invite trouble. You find the narrow dirt road and begin the real journey. Birds start to stir, their calls echoing through the branches. The trees whisper overhead, their leaves rustling like soft conversation. Your heartbeat syncs with your steps. The world around you feels vast, old, and watchful. Half a mile in, you see them. Fresh wagon tracks cutting through the dirt. You kneel briefly, touching the impressions. Probably a merchant, but possibly someone else. You straighten and keep walking. Travel rule. Number 2. Listen as much as you move. Every crack of a twig, every shift in the wind matters. A fringe tidbit floats into your thoughts. Some women in mountainous regions carried small bells tied inside their skirts, believing the jingling warded off forest spirits, and more importantly, startled, unwanted human company. It wasn't elegant, but neither is being ambushed. You walk on, the crunch of gravel beneath your soles steady and grounding. The sun begins to climb, slowly painting gold on the treetops. With more light comes more visibility. With visibility comes attention. As if on cue, you hear voices ahead, 2 men. Judging by the timbre, your pulse flicks upward. You slow your steps slightly, just enough to prepare. Then they appear around the bend, carrying sacks slung over their shoulders. They notice you instantly. One nods politely. The other stares a moment too long, eyes flicking from your bundle to your empty ring finger to your face. You straighten your spine, not afraid, not aggressive, just opaque. Traveling? The first man asks. Errand. You reply simply. The second man opens his mouth, likely to ask something entirely inappropriate in broad daylight, but his companion nudges him. We're headed to market, the polite one says. We'll walk ahead. And they do. You let them create distance, your pace just slow enough to avoid joining them, but just quick enough to keep them in sight until the road widens safely. Historians still argue whether men in this era were genuinely protective of traveling women, or whether they simply saw opportunity where society believed none should exist. You shrug internally. You've learned not to rely on any assumption that begins with men will. By midday, you reach a small clearing. The world opens into a gentle slope, dotted with wildflowers, yellow, white, delicate purple bells. You sit on a flat stone and sip water, letting the sun warm your shoulders. For a moment, you close your eyes. The breeze brushes your face. The scent of pine, damp earth, and crushed grass fills your lungs. You feel almost peaceful, almost free. Traveling gives you something you rarely get in the village: space. The kind that lets your thoughts unfold without interruption. Then a distant shout breaks the calm, someone calling for a lost goat. You smile. Some things never change. You rise and continue. The road curves into open farmland. You see the next village ahead, smoke rising, roofs clustered like a handful of scattered dice. Relief softens your shoulders. You head toward the farmer's cottage and deliver the poultices. The woman pays you with gratitude, a few coins, and a slice of bread warm from her hearth. You walked alone? She asks, surprised. Yes. She shakes her head. Braver than I. You don't feel brave. You feel practiced. On your way home, you keep the same steady pace. You watch the shadows carefully. You listen. Travel rule number 3. Survival is in the noticing. Back in your village, the familiar houses greet you like old, stubborn friends. You slide your beam across your door, locking it with the comfort of routine. Traveling alone doesn't just demand caution. It demands awareness. It demands skill. It demands courage disguised as simple forward motion. And every mile you walk is proof that independence, even fragile, questioned independence, is something you refuse to surrender. You wake with a slight ache in your calves, the kind you only get from walking long distances on uneven roads. The kind that reminds you you're alive, capable, and stubborn enough to cross forests before breakfast if necessary. As you stretch beneath your blanket, another truth settles into your thoughts. The city feels nothing like the village, and today you're heading there. You rise slowly, adjusting to the idea of crowds, noise, strangers, and freedom, threaded with danger. You make yourself a small breakfast, hard cheese, cool water, and a piece of yesterday's bread that could confidently double as a blunt force object. You dress with a different mindset than usual. Not modesty, not reputation, camouflage. Because the village watches you too closely, but the city? The city doesn't watch you closely enough. You choose a plain brown dress, a darker shawl, and tuck your hair beneath a simple linen cap. In the village, this would invite questions. In the city, it grants invisibility. A mainstream historical fact flickers into your mind. Large, medieval and early modern cities like London, Paris, or Florence hosted many single women widows, migrants, servants, laundresses, seamstresses, street vendors who slipped into the urban fabric because cities needed labor more than they needed moral supervision. Historians still argue whether city life freed women from rural scrutiny or simply replaced it with new forms of exploitation. Both feel true. Both shape your steps today. You leave at dawn, joining a small cluster of travelers on the main road. A man with a cart piled high with onions, 2 women selling butter, and a sullen teenager leading a reluctant donkey. Safety in numbers. Also, onions in numbers. You try not to walk too close. By mid-morning, the city walls rise before you, massive weathered stone that makes your village look like a child's drawing of a house. The gate is already busy. Merchants argue over tolls. Guards check sacks. A dog barks at everything that moves. A fishmonger is shouting about eels with the enthusiasm of someone selling magical relics. And then you step inside. The city hits you all at once: sound, color, smell. Chatter bouncing from every direction, shouts of vendors, the clatter of cartwheels, the smell of bread, smoke, sweat, horses, spices, and a background aroma you decide not to identify. Your senses spin for a moment, but you ground yourself quickly. You have a task. Deliver 2 bundles of thread to a shopkeeper and stock up on herbs you can't grow at home. Head down, eyes alert, walk with purpose. In the narrow streets, single women exist everywhere. You see laundresses elbow-deep in tubs of grey water, a group of older widows selling pies, a young woman sweeping the step of a tavern with more aggression than the broom deserves, a seamstress stitching as she walks, needle moving as fast as her feet. City women are sharp, quick, scarred, capable. You move among them like a candle flame among lanterns. You stop by the shopkeeper who purchases your thread. He barely looks at you as he weighs the bundles. City merchants are too busy to care about your marital status. The anonymity feels strange and refreshing, like taking a deep breath after days of shallow ones. As you walk through a crowded lane marketplace, you overhear a fringe tidbit from a pair of travelers. In some cities, women living alone would sleep in shared lodgings called penny rooms, paying a single coin to rest upright on a bench among strangers. No beds, no blankets, just a place where no one would judge you for existing alone. The image is unsettling, but also oddly comforting. Even in the harshest places, women found a way to survive together. You continue through the market, buying dried bay leaves and chicory root, weaving your way through crowds like water moving around stones. The city demands agility. A single hesitation can get you bumped, swindled, or trampled by a sheep that somehow escaped someone's cart. At midday, you pause in a small courtyard. Children play loudly. Pigeons battle each other for crumbs with the fury of tiny gladiators. A priest preaches under a tree, while 3 men ignore him completely to argue about the price of salt. And there, beside the fountain, you see her, a woman your age, maybe older, standing alone with a basket of laundry. She catches your eye. You exchange a small nod, the kind that says, "You live alone too, don't you?" You know the quiet I know. You feel the vigilance I feel. No words, just recognition. Because city women who live alone can sense each other instantly. Something about the posture, the scanning eyes, the subtle way they protect their belongings without looking paranoid. You continue your errands. You buy a small loaf, sample a new kind of cheese that tastes like ambition and regret, and navigate around a street performer dancing with questionable enthusiasm. You breathe deeply, letting the city's chaotic rhythm pulse through you. Historians still argue whether cities liberated women by offering anonymity or endangered them by offering too much of it. Walking these streets, you understand how complicated the truth is. In the village, you are watched too closely. In the city, you must watch for yourself. Late afternoon arrives. You step back toward the gates, your bundle full, your purse not entirely empty, your senses buzzing with the strange mix of fear and freedom that city life inspires. As you walk home, the countryside slowly quiets, the noise still ringing in your ears. Birds replace merchants, leaves replace voices. The path opens wide, and for a moment you almost feel weightless. When you finally reach your village, the air feels smaller but familiar. Predictable. Yours. You slide the beam across your door and sit at your table, replaying the day. City life is louder, faster, sharper, more dangerous, more liberating. A woman living alone can disappear there, or be swallowed whole. But you return home stronger, wiser, and just a little more certain that your world, small as it is, belongs firmly in your hands. You wake before dawn, curled beneath your blanket, listening to the muted sounds of your little house settling into another day. A sparrow scratches at the thatch above your head. The wind sighs through the shutters. Somewhere far off, a dog barks at absolutely nothing, an ancient tradition dogs have upheld for centuries without explanation. You breathe slowly, aware of the familiar tension beneath your ribs. Because today, more than most days, you're thinking about one unspoken truth every woman who lives alone must master: how to avoid trouble. Not by hiding, not by obeying blindly, but by learning the small, clever tricks that allow you to walk through the world without painting a target on your back. You sit up and run your hands over your hair, feeling the faint sleep tangle. You smooth it into a modest braid, not too loose, that's inviting attention. Not too tight, that's trying too hard. Sometimes it feels like your hairstyle carries more social weight than your actual personality. A mainstream historical fact floats quietly into your thoughts. Records from medieval towns show that single women often developed specific routines to avoid suspicion. Lighting candles at conventional times, performing chores in doorways, or timing errands so they always appeared visible, predictable, reliable. Historians still argue whether this was self-protection or social conditioning. Living here, it's survival dressed up as courtesy. You step outside into the crisp morning. The street is quiet, except for a neighbor's rooster, who is absolutely convinced he is the loudest creature ever created. You start your day with a small walk, one of your most important defensive habits. Travel pattern trick number 1. Walk the same route each morning. People trust patterns, they distrust surprises, and distrust invited trouble. You walk past Helda's place. She's already awake, sweeping with the furious intensity of someone sweeping away, both dust and yesterday's gossip. She nods to you. You nod back. The silent acknowledgement says, "I see you. I see your safety. We are not alone." You continue to the well. Fetching water early proves you are industrious. Fetching water late proves, who knows? The villagers will invent a reason. Travel trick number 2. Carry something that looks heavy. People assume women carrying burdens are busy, respectable, and unlikely to be doing anything improper. You once heard Lysa mutter, "A full bucket is worth 10 sermons." She's not wrong. On the way home, you notice a man you don't recognize leaning against a fence. A traveler. His clothes are dusty, his expression faintly curious. You adjust your posture without thinking, chin neutral, gaze downward but aware, step steady, not afraid, not inviting, not engaging. He nods politely. You nod back. That's enough. Women like you rarely have the luxury of lingering interactions with strangers. Back inside, you prepare herbs for drying. You bundle lavender and hang it near the hearth. You grind dried chamomile with a smooth stone, the rhythm calming your nerves. The scent fills the air soft, floral, soothing. You recall a fringe tidbit from an older woman you once met. Some single women used to hang a man's cloak on a peg by the door, even if they had no man in their lives, just to create the illusion of a male presence. A cloak, a hat, a pair of boots, fake guardians with surprisingly high reputations. Sometimes you consider borrowing a pair of old boots from Helda just to see how quickly the gossip evaporates. By midday, you step outside to gather firewood from the small cluster of trees beyond the village. This part always requires strategy. Firewood trick number 3. Take only what you can carry easily. A woman struggling with a heavy load invites help, which often turns into questions, assumptions, or those awful unsolicited lectures from men about proper womanly conduct. You'd rather carry 3 small bundles than 1 large hassle. As you collect fallen branches, you hear footsteps. You turn slowly, lightly, and see 2 men from the village approaching with tools slung over their shoulders. They nod in greeting. You answer with a calm, neutral tone, never hostile, never encouraging, just balanced. They pass without incident. Historians still argue whether men truly posed greater risk to independent women, or whether communities simply imagined danger where none existed. But you've lived enough days in this world to know the truth. Men don't need bad intentions to be dangerous. Sometimes, all they need is confusion. Back home, you place your wood neatly by the hearth. You reward yourself with a small piece of cheese, your version of a victory medal. Later in the afternoon, you perform one of your favorite defensive rituals, the illusion of visitors. You move around your home loudly enough for neighbors to hear. A chair scraped, gently, a pot settled firmly, footsteps paced meaningfully, not frantic, not theatrical, just enough noise to imply someone else might be inside. Lysa taught you this trick. She says, sound is safety. She's right. As evening descends, you go outside to check your door latch. Twice. Then a third time. Because vigilance is not paranoia when you're statistically at higher risk than everyone else. The sky glows deep purple. A cool breeze sweeps through the street. You notice the priest walking past, nodding politely. You return the nod. He sees only a quiet, orderly woman settling in for the night. Good. Inside, you light a candle. You set your beam across the door. You murmur a quiet phrase your mother taught you, not magic, not prayer, just a grounding rhythm. Historians still argue whether these routines were conscious defenses or simply habits grown from fear. But to you, each action is a decision. To exist safely. To remain unseen when necessary. To stay visible when required. To turn solitude into strategy. To avoid danger without surrendering independence. Avoiding trouble is not cowardice. It's intelligence. It's endurance. It's the quiet art of moving through the world with your dignity intact. And tonight, as you lie beneath your blanket and listen to the soft settling of your home, you realize something else. All these little tricks, these careful movements are not signs of weakness. They are signs of a woman who has learned the world and learned how to survive it. You wake slowly, the kind of slow that comes from a night without interruptions, no startled creaks, no wayward winds rattling shutters, no late-night footsteps that make your heart climb your ribs, just quiet, peaceful, sturdy quiet. You stretch beneath your blanket and feel something rare and precious settle into your bones. Acceptance. Not from yourself, you had that long ago, but from the village. Or, if not acceptance, then something nearby. Respect, maybe. Or resignation. Or simply the villagers realizing you are not going anywhere no matter how loudly they whisper. You sit up, rubbing the sleep from your eyes. The room feels different today, not bigger, not brighter, but gentler, as though the world has finally exhaled around you. You dress simply and step outside with steady steps. The morning air greets you warmly. Sunlight filters through the trees. Chickens scratch at the ground as though they've forgiven you for existing. Even the gossiping older women glance your way and brace yourself smile. Not much. Not warmly. But they smile. That's basically a standing ovation in this village. A mainstream historical fact slips into your thoughts. In many communities, single women who stayed long enough, who worked, contributed, endured, survived, eventually transitioned from suspicious to necessary. They became trusted healers, respected midwives, reliable workers, or simply the familiar face everyone expected to see at the well every morning. Historians still argue whether this shift came from genuine respect or simply from villagers realizing these women weren't secretly plotting chaos. But the result was the same. Acceptance arrived slowly, like moss creeping over old stone. You make your way to the well, and for the first time in weeks, the whispers aren't about you. Someone's cow has escaped again. Someone's son fell into a barrel. Someone's husband lost a shoe and blamed the devil, though everyone knows he just forgets how walking works sometimes. You smile politely and begin lowering your bucket when Marta approaches with a warm nod. You're early, she says, not suspiciously but conversationally. Habit, you reply. She laughs softly. A good habit. There is a softness in her voice that wasn't there before. A recognition. She knows you now, not the stories, not the rumors, not the assumptions. You, the way you rise early, work steadily, help when asked, and exist, without apology. Respect always begins with familiarity. On your walk home, you pass Marin and Lysa fixing a fence. Helda joins a moment later, hammer in hand. The four of you exchange greetings like a small constellation of women who have earned their orbit in this world through sheer gravity of endurance. Marin hands you a bundle. Dried mushrooms, she says. Trade for some herbs later. You nod. Of course. These exchanges, small as they are, send a message the village understands. You belong to a network. You are not alone. Mess with one, answer to all. You cross paths with the priest next. Normally, he would adjust his tone to that gentle, patronizing moral guidance voice. But today, he simply nods and offers. Your roof looks sturdier since the repair. You raise an eyebrow. No questions today? He chuckles. Just observations. Progress. Back at home, you work on your small garden. The earth crumbles easily beneath your fingers. As you plant new seeds, you hear footsteps approaching. It's Tomas, the beekeeper's son, the shy one whom gossipers once insisted must be your secret lover because he returned your spindle once. Today, he arrives with a wooden box. These are for you, he mumbles. Inside are beeswax candles, 6 of them, smooth and golden. For your late-night work, he adds, still not quite meeting your eyes. You don't have to, but if you want, you smile gently. Thank you. Not romantic, not scandalous, just kind. And more importantly, a man bringing you candles is no longer village headline material. They've adapted, or grown bored, or simply realized you're not the type who will run off with someone's sheep and elope. Later in the afternoon, the elder you once feared approaches as you sweep your doorstep. Your herbs help my wife's cough, he says gruffly. She slept well. A pause. You have a good skill. You blink, trying not to show shock. Compliments from him are rarer than unicorn sightings. Historians still argue whether acceptance of single women came from familiarity or necessity. But living this moment, you understand the third truth scholars often overlook. Acceptance comes from quiet consistency. You didn't argue. You didn't plead. You didn't prove anything. You simply lived. And eventually, people grew used to the shape of your life. By evening, the village feels soft around the edges like fabric worn by years of use. No longer scratchy, no longer new or suspicious. Children wave as you walk by. A neighbor offers you leftover stew. Someone even asks your opinion on whether the harvest festival should feature musicians or dancers. Your opinion, asked for, publicly. You sit on your doorstep as the sky shifts into twilight, the air cooling as it always does. You feel a lightness in your chest, a subtle easing of the vigilance that once lived inside your ribs like a lodged stone. Not gone, never gone. You know the world, too well for that. But softer. You watch villagers pass by people who once whispered, avoided, judged. Now they nod, they greet, they accept. Because you endured long enough for truth to outlive rumor. Because you remained exactly who you are until they had no choice but to see it. Acceptance doesn't arrive with a fanfare, it arrives with a nod at the well. A shared smile, a trade of mushrooms, a bundle of candles left on your doorstep. Small gestures, small acknowledgements, small pieces of a life earned, not granted. And tonight, as you slide the beam across your door, the world feels a little less sharp, a little less suspicious, a little more your own. You wake to a soft, warm morning, the kind that slips quietly into your home like a familiar friend. Sunlight spills through the shutters in wide golden stripes, dust drifting lazily through the beams. You stretch, feeling the pleasant ache of yesterday's work, and sit up slowly. Today isn't like other days. Today your mind drifts to something bigger than chores, gossip, or village politics. Today, you think about the women who came before you, and the ones history tried very hard to forget. Real women, solitary women. Women who lived on their own terms long before anyone had the vocabulary to describe them. You step outside, inhaling the crisp morning air. The village is already alive, carts creaking, hens fussing, children running in small circles like chaotic meteors. Everything feels normal, familiar, almost easy. But as you walk down the lane toward your garden, your thoughts wander far beyond your little village, towards stories whispered by travelers, merchants, and wandering storytellers. Stories of women who carved out lives even more unusual and more courageous than your own. A mainstream historical fact folds gently into your thoughts. Many medieval and early modern communities recorded only fragments of women's lives, especially those who lived alone. Yet the fragments we do have show widows running shops, female artisans signing contracts, healers leading communities, and even hermit women living in tiny huts outside town walls. Historians still argue whether these women were tolerated, feared, or quietly admired. The truth, you suspect, is all of those at once. As you tend your herbs, tying sprigs of rosemary with twine, you remember the tale of Gudrun the Weaver, a woman who lived alone on the edge of a northern town. Travelers said she was so skilled at her loom that nobles sought her cloth. And yet she refused all patronage that came with strings attached, especially the strings pulled by men with too much power and too little humility. Gudrun outlived 3 kings, 2 invasions, and 1 very persistent priest who kept telling her she should remarry. She told him she'd consider it when he could weave half as well as she could. He never asked again. You smile softly at the story. Gudrun sounds like someone you'd sit beside at the well, trading herb tips and sarcastic commentary. As you walk toward the market, you think of another story told by a travelling peddler. Ismene of Thessaly, the solitary scholar. She lived in a crumbling tower room above a spice shop, surrounded by scrolls, ink, and ideas nobody cared to read until someone realized she could calculate market taxes faster than the magistrate. Soon she became indispensable. Not celebrated, of course that would be too generous, but tolerated, consulted, and eventually respected. The magistrate reportedly pretended her ideas were his, and she let him because she preferred peace to credit. A strategic genius, really. Your thoughts drift as you pass the baker's stall. The bread smells warm, comforting. Thomas, the beekeeper's shy son, waves awkwardly from across the market. You lift your hand in return, then continue toward the herbalist's table. While selecting dried comfrey, you remember the tale of Aina of the marshlands, a woman who lived alone not by choice, but by absolute necessity. Floods had taken her home, her family, and every familiar thing she once knew. So she learned to survive in the marsh, fishing, gathering, building, navigating treacherous tide paths. Locals feared her at first, whispering swamp witch stories. But when a fever swept their village, it was Aina who brought the herbs that saved them. After that, people visited her marsh cottage with offerings, requests, and quiet gratitude. She never moved back among them, but she wasn't alone anymore. You hand the herbalist your coins. She nods respectfully now, not merely politely. Another small piece of your life shifting. As you head home, another memory flickers, one closer to legend than fact, the anchoresses. Women who chose solitude so fiercely that they were literally sealed into tiny chambers attached to churches' windows facing the street, receiving food and visitors through a slot. Solitude as devotion, isolation as purpose. Historians still argue whether their lives were empowering, tragic, or something in between. But their names survive, carved into stone. Juliana, Christina, Marjorie, women who lived alone, intentionally, long before that was ever considered a legitimate choice. You reach your door and pause, feeling the weight of these stories settle warmly in your chest. They aren't just legends. They are mirrors distorted by time, softened by retelling, but true in essence. Women like you have existed everywhere, in every century, in every forgotten corner of every map. Some survived through skill, some through stubbornness, some through intellect, some through sheer refusal to bend. All of them lived outside the frame society built for them. All of them carved out a shape for themselves anyway. Inside your little home, you set down your basket and run your hand along the edge of your table, the one you repaired yourself last winter. You feel a quiet pride settle into your bones, not loud, not dramatic, but steady. You light a candle. The flame flickers like a heartbeat. Historians still argue whether these solitary women shaped their communities or merely endured them. But standing here, with your hands smelling of herbs and your thoughts full of stories, you understand a truth scholars often forget. These women weren't exceptions. They were foundations, quiet pillars holding up parts of the world no one bothered to record. And you are one of them. Not legendary, not famous, not carved into stone, but real, steady, independent, alive. And your story, ordinary and extraordinary, in equal measure, deserves to be remembered too. You wake slowly, wrapped in the soft weight of your blanket, your body warm, and your mind drifting in that quiet space between dreams and morning. For a long moment, you don't move. You simply breathe, letting the stillness wrap around you like an extra layer of comfort. The room is dim, the fire reduced to faint orange embers, the air cool but gentle, and in that quiet, you feel something heavy and complicated. settle into your chest. The emotional weight of living alone. Not the gossip, not the danger, not the politics, but the feeling of it. You sit up, slowly. Solitude has its own texture, its own rhythm. Some days it feels like freedom, fresh air, wide open, wild. Other days it feels like a stone in your pocket, small, but always there. You run your palms over your blanket and exhale softly. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Chronic loneliness as we define it today wasn't described in medieval records, not because people didn't experience it, but because daily, survival left little room to dwell on it. And still, historians argue whether solitary women in the past felt more loneliness than others, or simply had fewer socially acceptable ways to express it. You stand, slowly, stretching your arms. The morning light touches the room like a shy visitor. The floor is cool beneath your feet. The world outside hums faintly someone's rooster, a cartwheel creaking, a low murmur of voices greeting the day. You dress carefully, each motion automatic. Living alone means you become your own ritual, your own clock, your own anchor. As you step outside, the crisp morning air brushes against your cheeks. You pause, watching a pair of sparrows skitter across the path. You envy them, a little always in pairs, always chattering. Your life, by comparison, feels quieter than most can imagine. You walk toward the well. Marta greets you warmly. Lysa waves from across the street. Helda calls out that she has extra honey if you want some later. These gestures warm you. They matter. They stitch you into the fabric of the village. But companionship and company aren't the same thing. You lower your bucket into the well, listening to the soft splash. As you haul it back up, you feel a heaviness in your arms, in your chest. A weight that doesn't hurt, but insists. A reminder that even a woman as steady as you can sometimes feel the edges of solitude pressing inward. You see Tomas walking past with a bundle of firewood. He offers a shy smile. You return it, friendly, gentle. But neither of you mistakes it for something it isn't. Because you've learned to keep your world stable, and he's learned to respect the boundaries you've carved so carefully. On the way home, you pass a door slightly ajar and hear a couple laughing inside, soft, warm laughter that spills into the street like sunlight. It catches you unexpectedly. You don't begrudge them, but you do feel a small twinge, a reminder that your solitude, chosen or inherited, comes with empty spaces. Inside your home, you set the water down and pause. The room feels familiar, comforting, but also undeniably quiet. Too quiet. You hum softly one of your mother's old tunes just to fill the room with something. A fringe tidbit flickers into your thoughts. In some regions, solitary women were believed to attract spirits because empty rooms invite unseen company. Honestly, you'd welcome a mild-mannered ghost if it meant someone else listening to your jokes. You sit at your table, hands folded, and let your thoughts wander. You think about the women you know, the ones still living, the ones you've heard stories about, the ones who carved meaning out of aloneness. Some embraced silence. Others filled their homes with work, or pets, or prayers. You think about what fills your emptiness. The soft strength in your routines. The camaraderie of other solitary women. Small kindnesses from villagers who once feared you. Your garden. Your quiet hearth. Your mind, your clever, observant, restless mind. Historians still argue whether single women were emotionally fulfilled, emotionally deprived, emotionally resilient, or emotionally invisible. But sitting here, with the quiet curling around your ankles, you understand what the records rarely acknowledge. Solitude has many faces, some gentle, some sharp, all honest. You rise, stirring your pot of breakfast porridge. The steam rises, smelling faintly of barley and honey. You eat slowly, thoughtfully, alone, yes, but not empty. As midday approaches, you sit by your small window, watching dust drift in the sunlight. Something loosens inside you. Something softens. You remember that loneliness is not proof of weakness, and solitude is not proof of failure. Your heart moves through quiet cycles: pride, ache, stillness, joy, weariness, hope. And through it all, you continue. Because that's what women like you do. You feel everything sharply, quietly, deeply, and keep moving, anyway. In the evening, as you slide the wooden beam across your door, you feel the day settle behind your ribs. Your house holds you the way it always does, solid, steady, sincere, Living alone shapes you in ways others will never see. It makes you both tender and tough, hollow and full, silent and strong. And beneath all of it is the truth you whisper to yourself as you slip into bed. You are enough, even in your quietest moments, especially in your quietest moments. You wake before dawn, wrapped in a softness you can't quite name. Not joy, not sorrow, something gentler. A quiet awareness that today feels different, as though the air itself is shifting around you. You rise slowly, grounding yourself in the familiar rhythm of your small home. The crackle of leftover embers, the faint draft beneath the door, the weight of your shawl settling across your shoulders. You step outside, and the morning greets you with a pearly sky, pale and wide. The village is still half asleep. A child yawns on a doorstep. Someone's cow moos with impressive dramatics. A rooster tries to crow and cracks his voice halfway through. Life goes on in its uneven, endearing way. But today, your thoughts stretch beyond the village, beyond your daily patterns, beyond the whispers that once clung to you. Today, you're thinking about legacy, about what remains, about the marks left behind by women who lived in quiet corners, far from record books and royal chronicles. You walk toward the well, your steps relaxed, unhurried. For once, you don't feel watched. You feel present, rooted, known. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Most women's lives, especially solitary women, went unrecorded in official histories. Scholars dig through court rolls, tax lists, wills, and parish registers to catch even a glimpse of them. Historians still argue whether this absence was intentional, accidental, or simply the result of men writing what men found important. But those tiny traces, a name on a grain ledger, a witness signature, a recorded fine shine like sparks in the dark. As you lower your bucket, Marta joins you. "The herbs you gave me worked," she says warmly. "I slept for the first time in a week." You smile. "I'm glad. Not long ago, the same remedy would have earned you suspicion. Now it earns you gratitude. Progress, forged not by triumph or confrontation, but by endurance." Walking home, you think of something Helder once said while mending a torn cloak. "We are threads, you and I. People don't see us unless we snap." Maybe she's right. Or maybe people do see the threads, they just don't realize how many hold the world together. Back in your tiny home, you move through your chores with a new awareness. Each action feels like something larger than itself. Stirring the pot, folding cloth, sweeping the hearth. These ordinary moments, your moments, become the quiet architecture of a life well lived. You sit at your table and let your gaze travel across the room. It's simple, yes, but everything here is shaped by your hands, your work, your choices, your persistence. You built this life in a world that didn't design a place for you. That alone is legacy. Later, you step outside into the afternoon warmth. Children run past you laughing. Lisa calls out from across the street, waving a new knife she's proud of. Marin sits near her window, weaving something intricate. Even Thomas passes by with his awkward, kind smile and a jar of fresh honey. You are part of this place now. A piece of its living memory. A fringe tidbit slides into your thoughts. Archaeologists once uncovered a medieval cottage with charms carved into beams, herbs preserved under floorboards, and a single pair of carefully mended shoes. The researchers didn't know her name, but they knew she lived alone and lived well. Her story survived through objects, routines, everyday resilience. Proof that solitude does not erase a life. It shapes it. As evening settles, you sit outside for a long while, watching the sun slip behind the trees. The sky melts from gold to deep purple. The air cools. Lanterns spark to life across the village. Your heart holds a quiet truth. You may never be written into a history book. You may never be carved into stone. But your life, your steady days, your choices, your strength will ripple outward in ways you'll never fully see. Perhaps in the memories of neighbors. Perhaps in stories passed down. Perhaps simply in the mark your existence leaves on this small, fragile corner of the world. The truth about women who lived alone without a man is simple and profound. They survived. They shaped communities quietly. They built small worlds with their own hands. They mattered. And so do you. You rise, step inside, and slide the wooden beam across your door one last time in our story. Your home embraces you. The candle flickers softly. Your breath finds its own slow rhythm. The day ends the way all good days do, in stillness, in warmth, in the quiet knowledge that your life, ordinary and extraordinary, is yours. The night settles gently now, wrapping itself around you like a soft wool blanket warmed by the embers of a fading fire. The world beyond your door quiets into a hush so delicate you can almost hear the shadows stretching, slowing, becoming long and tender as the last traces of daylight slip away. You breathe in deeply, letting the cool air fill your lungs, letting it soften the edges of your thoughts, letting it carry away whatever weight remains from the long journey you've just walked. Your little home, imagined or real, feels like it's exhaling with you, timber and stone relaxing into the stillness. The candlelight becomes a warm halo, its glow wobbling gently like a drifting memory. Every object in the room seems softened, blurred, as though time has slowed its pulse just for you. Your heartbeat quiets. Your shoulders loosen. The room becomes a cocoon of warm breath and gentle shadow, holding you safely in its palms. Let the images of the day drift out of focus. The village well, the morning sun, the footsteps on the road. All of it dissolves like mist over calm water. What remains is only ease, only warmth, only you resting, safe, unhurried. Allow your breath to lengthen, each inhale a little slower, each exhale a little deeper. Feel the softness gathering at the edges of your awareness, the way darkness gathers at the edges of a candle flame. You don't have to hold anything now. Not a thought, not a memory, not a burden. Tonight, you can simply rest. Tonight, the world is quiet enough for sleep to find you without effort. Tonight, you've walked a long path, and now it's time to drift gently, slowly, peacefully into stillness.